I do the same thing.
Welcome to the Better Birth podcast. I am very, very honoured to have the wonderful Hannah Palamara on today, talking about birth photography. She is a birth photographer. She's also a doula and a fantastic birth worker. And she was my doula at my second birth. So I am very, very excited to finally have you on, Hannah.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, I am a birth photographer. I'm a doula and birth keeper. I'm a coach for women, and I'm also a mother. And I'm in my 10th year doing this work now. And it was my own three birth experiences that brought me into the birth world, like a lot of us in this field. And I had two unnecessary cesareans, and then I had a very healing home birth with my son, not without its own adventures and some trauma too. But ultimately, I felt like I'd kind of landed after I had my son and found my calling, which sounds so cringy, but I'd always been searching for, I guess we could call it my dharma, my soul's true purpose. And for me, it really has been working with women and couples through pregnancy and birth that has been fulfilling that for me.
Mm.
And previously to that, I studied fashion media communication at London College of Fashion, and I worked for a little while as a stylist and for a modeling agency and with an amazing photographer. And I started to be a little bit interested in photography then as well. And then it was when I first started attending births as a doula that I was just kind of becoming interested in photography. I had no idea how to work my camera on manual or anything like that. I was pretty bad. But I said to my doula clients, please, can I take a few photos at your birth? And they were all like, yes, and there was no pressure because I wasn't charging them. It was just what I could capture. And so I literally learned how to be a photographer in the birth space. So that I don't recommend doing that. But for me, it was an amazing education into photography and birth photography because I had my doula knowledge and education, and so I was able to learn how to document in the birth space, which is one of the most difficult places to document and create photojournalism because you can't control anything about your surroundings or your subjects, and you also have some of the most difficult environments. So it's dark, it's quiet, you can't interrupt, you can't move people. So it was really interesting, but I was hooked from day one when I first got photos at a birth. My first birth I attended, actually I took some photos and I was their doula as well, and it was just, I was completely obsessed. And birth photography wasn't a thing in the UK then. I didn't even know much about it, in the US, where it's been a really big industry for a long time. But that was kind of my foray into this work, and here I am, nearly 10 years later.
And your work is amazing. I love, love, love the photography that you share on Instagram. It is beautiful. And you talk about like the difficult, how it is the difficult environment and difficult circumstances to photograph. So what kind of things do you have to kind of consider? How is birth photography different from other forms of photography?
Yeah, it's an amazing question. And it's something that I like to educate on a lot as well. So I do feel that anybody who's interested in doing birth photography would really benefit from either doing a doula training, a hypnobirthing course, any kind of, really in-depth birth physiology course. Because if you could be an extremely experienced photographer and take incredible photos, but just taking that knowledge and experience into the birth space, you could completely disrupt somebody's birth and cause something really terrible to happen, or just really annoy the birthing mother or their team. So I think that every birth photographer would benefit from having some pretty good knowledge before they go into the birth space of exactly how birth works and what is needed to facilitate the environment for birth. And that's whether you're going into an elective cesarean as the photographer, or you're going into a free birth or a home birth. Because when you're working as a birth photographer within the birth space, you have a lot of different things that you need to consider. And there's the whole technical side of being a photographer, like how do I work my camera in super low light? How do I use flash in an unobtrusive way? all of that is a whole thing. But then the other side to it is that knowledge, because if you have that knowledge, you know that you don't want to just stand in the space continuously taking photos, or directing your flash into someone's face, or because those things could disrupt the space and they could impact that person's birth.
Yeah, I think it's really important, isn't it, when choosing the birth photographer, I guess, to make sure that they are going to be discreet and unobtrusive, and that they've got experience doing specifically birth photography.
Yeah,
Because you're right, that person could potentially disrupt that environment, and that can have an impact on how birth unfolds.
definitely.
So why do people book a birth photographer? Why would someone consider having their birth documented?
Yeah. Well, it's one of the most important days of your entire life. When you think about it, like it is, as a woman, it's probably the most transformational experience that we go through. And obviously for partners and for men and for everybody else, it's, people document their weddings, and they spend tens of thousands actually on wedding photographers for that day. But when you think about it, why would you not want to document the birth of your baby? I mean, for me, having done this for so long, I'm just like, this is a no-brainer. But if you're coming and you're listening and you're just like, why would you take photos of this? Well, birth photography, often people would talk about, well, I don't want to get photos of that moment, like the crotch shot, we call it, which is so cross. But ultimately, birth photography is not just about capturing the moments of your baby emerging, although those really are the most amazing moments to be able to look back on, especially as the woman giving birth. You don't see that happening per se from an outside perspective. And so being able to see that moment is actually really unbelievable, not just because you suddenly see like what a total badass you are for birthing your baby, however that is, if that's an elective cesarean, however the baby's born, but also it gives you a completely different perspective and view of your birth story. When we go into our birth bubble, I call it, we're going into that part of our brain to go inwards. We are switching off, from everything in the outside world, ideally. And so we're not going to be paying attention. So when women look back at their birth stories in images, they see so many beautiful things. They see their partners supporting them. They might see their other children like running around and having fun. All these different elements to the story that happen. And also sometimes for moments in birth that might be difficult or traumatic, or things that happen, having your birth in images or in video, because I also make birth films for people, is an amazing debrief, whether that's from a positive or a negative perspective. Yeah.
It's so true, isn't it? When you go into that birth bubble, I don't really remember my second and third births, to be honest. I definitely remember my first because for not so positive reasons, but my second and third births, I really did go inward, and I don't remember the details, and I now with hindsight do wish that I had documented my births, because I didn't. And I have the odd snap from it that was taken on a phone, and that's and I cherish those photos, but I don't have nice photos of the birth, and I don't remember a lot of it.
Yes.
And I would like to have that kind of memory and that memento of that amazing day, because it's not just for me, for the kids as well, right? Because how
Absolutely.
wonderful can they, they can look back on these amazing photos of the day that they were born, which I think is
Yeah.
wonderful. And I think some people may be reluctant because of the crotch shot, or because I think we live in an age where we document things for public consumption, right?
Right.
Yeah, we take the wedding photos so that we can plaster them all over Facebook and Instagram for everybody else to see. But I think, from my own personal perspective, getting your birth documented is very much for you, for you
Yes.
and your family to cherish and to be able to look back on.
I love that you said that, actually, because, a lot of people might see my Instagram and, I do share a lot of my work on there. But it's obviously always with permission, prior permission to my clients. But what I always say, when I, and I have it in all the information that I send out to my prospective clients as well, this is their own private experience and these images are for them only. And, like you said, it's not necessarily to plaster it all over Facebook or somewhere else. It's not owed to anybody. It's for you and your experience. It just so happens that a lot of people are open to sharing their images as well. And if they're not, that's fine. I have documented so many births that nobody's ever seen any of the images. And that is, I don't do it for that reason. I do it for my clients. And then if I do get permission to share, then it's incredible because it does, it helps educate, not necessarily on birth photography, but on physiological birth, on, elective cesarean birth, and, all of those things. And I think that can be really helpful because birth, as we know, can be portrayed so badly through the media on shows like One Born Every Minute, that being able to see real images and videos of birth and what it can look like and what it does look like, it does educate, on a really large scale.
Yeah,
that I think is really, really incredible. Yeah,
I think it's really important that the work that you do is important for the families, but also, like you say, from an educational perspective.
yeah.
And I see so many wonderful images on Instagram, and I'll share them to my stories when I see, a wonderful birth video or, a wonderful shot that just demonstrates something, because that's not what's perceived as the norm, is it? It's not what we see on TV. It's not what gets reported in the news. Everything's sensationalist and dramatic and traumatic.
That's right.
So it's wonderful to see these wonderful, beautiful images of physiological birth.
Definitely.
But also cesarean, like you keep on talking about surgical births. And I think people who are having a cesarean wouldn't necessarily think to get a birth photographer.
Yeah.
It's such a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. So I've been at a number of cesarean births throughout my career, some planned and some unplanned. And it's just as important to be able to document your birth if you're having an elective cesarean as if you're having a vaginal birth. Like, why not? You're still giving birth and having a baby. And so something that I'm really pushing, especially as it's been Cesarean Awareness Month, is being able to educate people to have birth photographers at their births for elective cesareans. It does take, a little bit of planning. And that's just, so it goes in two ways. Either the birth photographer myself would be allowed into theatre with my client and their partner to be able to document the whole birth. Or if that's not possible, then I document their story. So I come with them to the hospital, document them preparing, all of the little moments, and video is also amazing for that. And then I would document up to the moment that they go into theatre. And then I would give a camera to either their partner or a midwife or someone who's willing. So they could get something, or even phone shots or video works as well. And then I would meet them in recovery afterwards and continue their story there. So that's one way. Or if we're able to have meetings with their consultant and hopefully with the anaesthetist as well, because it's usually the anaesthetist on the day who has the say over whether they would allow an additional person into theatre. This is in the UK. And B, someone to take photos. And if we get preliminary meetings and permission in place, then sometimes I'm allowed into theatre as well, which is really, really amazing, because then I can document, the entire birth happening that way. Yeah.
I think it's such a lovely idea. And I think it's a shame that it's not something that gets signed off, all the time, because it obviously can be done, because it is done.
Absolutely.
But I think it's such a lovely idea to document that, because you're right, you're still giving birth. A belly birth is still giving birth,
Absolutely. It's just as important. Yeah. And there's just so much to capture in exactly the same way. So I would love to, to speak more about it and to have more conversations openly about this as well, because I think sometimes maybe the medical staff and the hospitals are really concerned, about the extra person in theatre, but also someone documenting, and they can get all nervous about it. But once they understand, we're being hired by the person giving birth, the client of mine, and it's about their story. It's not necessarily about capturing staff and what they're doing, and that can be edited out and blurred and that kind of stuff. I think in general, like for people planning elective cesareans, and this is a slightly different tangent, but there's so much that can be put in place to really make it a more positive and, gentle experience for the mother and for the baby.
Yeah. And I guess the more people that document their cesarean births, the more likely other people are going to be able to do it, because it becomes more of the norm and more
Yeah.
accepted.
Yeah, I'm surprised that, because I've been a birth photographer for such a long time, that birth photography in the UK is still so niche,
Mm.
even almost 10 years later.
Mm.
And I just find that really interesting, and as you know, I've got a course right now. I'm teaching new and aspiring birth photographers. So I've got a lot of doulas and birth keepers and midwives who are interested in doing birth photography, and I'm going to be training them with an online program, and I mentor. And I wonder if it is going to start bringing the new wave of birth photographers to the UK, which I think would be wonderful, because there's some amazing courses in the US, Australia, Canada, where the industry is huge. So I think it's a really interesting time, because social media has also moved on massively from when I first started out as a birth photographer. So I just think it's going to be interesting to see if the industry does really pick up here in the UK. Because I mean, I'm pretty busy, and I don't know any other birth photographers in the UK that do video and that do birth films consistently at the moment. And I'm open to hearing from everyone, because I often like to collaborate with people, but it's so niche still. And I just think that's super interesting, because yeah, why wouldn't everyone have it?
What's your favorite birth that you documented, if you could pick one that really
Oh,
stands out?
actually, I couldn't pick one. But I will say a few favorites. I recently actually did an elective cesarean where I was allowed into theatre, and that was absolutely incredible. It was beautiful, and I just really loved the whole experience. But some of my most favorite births that I've documented over the years have been home births, and they have been births where they were just completely joyous. And I mean, you talk about the oxytocin, and at births it can go either way with how I feel energetically after the birth. If it's been really joyful, beautiful birth, I will literally just feel so high and incredible afterwards. And then obviously if it's difficult, then you feel different. And so there's been a few home births where it was just so beautiful from start to finish, no intervention. The woman just went through the experience, and it was just so straightforward, and it was just so joyful. And those are the births that I come away afterwards, and I just feel like this is such incredible work, and I'm so unbelievably blessed to be able to do this work.
Yeah.
And I will say that those were all women that I was probably their doula as well for most of them, and they did a lot of preparation. They prepared for those births, and they did the work, and they planned it and everything, so there was more likelihood that it would have gone that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And some of those were first time births too. I had a first birth last year. I had two amazing first time primips last year, first time birthers, that had beautiful, straightforward and pretty fast births,
Mm.
and they were joyful.
Yeah.
Because those women had invested from the very beginning of their pregnancies into doing the work and preparing for the type of birth that they wanted to have.
Yeah.
It wasn't luck. It was totally their own preparation.
Yeah. And we talk about that a lot, right? The importance of prep and the
Mm.
importance of educating. And it does give you a better chance. I mean, no one can ever be guaranteed an amazing birth, but it definitely gives you a better chance of having that wonderful birth.
Yeah, and just feeling like if you feel like you were listened to and you were respected, because you were yourself informed, then that can really change the perspective if things do go off piste.
Yeah.
Mm.
Euphoric comes to mind. Like, I think birth can be euphoric,
Yeah.
and I think people don't automatically associate birth with euphoria, uh,
Mm.
but
Mhm.
I think that's probably because lots of people give birth in a very medicalized environment that doesn't facilitate that kind of euphoric feeling afterwards, probably. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, those joyful births are just wonderful. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
What's your Okay, I've asked what your favorite births were, so you might find this one difficult to answer as well. But is there like a particular shot that you really like getting when you tend births?
There isn't one particular shot, but I love to get a shot of certain moments of the birth throughout. So I love to get images of, women in labor and whatever that looks like for them. Sometimes it's really raw and powerful, and then sometimes it's really quiet and peaceful. Obviously, I love what I call the catch, which is the moment where the mother catches her baby, however that happens. So whether she's catching in the pool or someone hands her baby on a bed, however it happens, I call it the catch. Obviously, the crowning moments, the crowning shots are incredible to capture, and yeah, they're amazing. But having done this for so long, there's a lot of other moments too. The expressions of, on the parents' faces, the reactions. Sometimes women have such amazing reactions, like total disbelief, just these looks on their faces. I also love to capture that first sort of skin to skin moment for the mother or the father or the partner. And for me, I'm obsessed with the third stage in placentas. So like, not just, facilitating that stage is like something that I never shut up about as a birth keeper and an educator. But also I love to capture the birth of the placenta and then to look at the placenta afterwards and get images of it.
Yes, I didn't see my placenta, I don't think, with all three of my births, which now I mourn because now I'm obsessed with placentas. I would have loved to seen my placenta and see what it looked like.
Yeah, I didn't really look at any of mine either. The third one a little bit, and I did get it encapsulated, but I didn't, I think I was too tired as well. But yeah, placentas are just like miraculous, and they're all different. Like sometimes they're really petite and small, and sometimes they're really huge and chunky, and sometimes they're in like the shape of a heart. And twin placentas are just, I did a twin birth last year, and the placentas were separate, but they had actually fused together within the womb. And so it was amazing to see afterwards, and I've got a picture somewhere. I probably need to share it again. It was just beautiful, and it was almost in a heart shape actually. So yeah, I love placentas. So many moments, just the whole story really. And I have to say, capturing birth in images or in video film is very, very different as well. Like it's a completely different experience to have, because people will sometimes say, which would you choose? It's really hard to choose between the two because they're so different. The feeling you get from images and what you get, and then the feeling you get from video, they're so different. So there isn't really one that's better than the other. So sometimes I do both together, which people love as well.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just sad. I'm sad I didn't get my births documented, but don't be me. Don't do what I did.
Have your birth, and me. Don't be me either. I didn't have any of mine professionally documented.
No.
And I've got like really terrible photos and video from my last birth, and I treasure them beyond anything. But I look so well, I think I look so terrible in the photos. But I'm still glad I have them, and I will still share them. So yeah, I'm really, really grateful for any.
What kind of area do you cover? Because if someone did want to hire you to photograph their birth, like how far out can you go to document a birth?
I mean, honestly, at this point, I would say that I am worldwide. So I'm based just below Southeast London in Kent. So currently I cover the whole of London, Kent, Sussex, Surrey, but I do travel to births if it works with my schedule. So I recently traveled up north to Nottingham for a birth. I maybe travel, I've traveled quite a few times. I've been to Wales. So I think if you're thinking of having your birth documented and you'd like to work with me, get in touch wherever you are. And depending on my schedule and what's going on, then it may be possible to have me. I would absolutely open to traveling abroad as well and flying to people. So it just depends where you are.
Amazing. And if anyone wants to see your wonderful, beautiful birth photography, where can they find it?
You can see my most recent work on my Instagram, which is at Hannah Palamara, honestly. And then I have a brand new website, which I'm really proud of, which is www.hannahpalamara.com or hannahpalamarabirthphotography.com. Those are my main spaces. I also have a podcast called My Vulnerable Voice, which you have just been a guest on, and that podcast is is actually based on personal growth, healing from trauma, and amazing stories. But we also have a birth series in there, so I do have amazing birth professionals like yourself in there.
Thank you so much for giving up your time today, and I can't wait to share more of your work and share your course as well. If anyone is interested in training to be a birth photographer, they can do that with you, can't they?
Come train with me. I would love to have you. Yeah, thanks so much, Erin, for having me. It's been an honor.
Oh, you're welcome.